Steve Howe is a name that is rarely seen on the covers of gossip publications, never yelled, and never sensational. He has never been expelled from a studio for using drugs or alcohol, and he never screams on stage or smashes his equipment. Nevertheless, he has continued to be one of the most important figures in the world of progressive rock for more than 50 years. This genre is renowned for its intricacy, daring, and need for complete originality. Steve Howe is the guitar soul of Yes, the first British rock band from Prague. He does more than just play, he uses sound to create art. His solos in Starship Trooper, Roundabout, and Close to the Edge merge virtuoso technique, raw passion, and freeform jazz with classical and modern, rustic folk and freeform, like streams of thought twisting through time. This song isn't meant to be danced to. It is designed for contemplation and immersion. Equipped with his trademark Gibson ES-175, Howe has forced the guitar community to acknowledge that beauty doesn't lie in speed, but in the deliberate choice of every single note. He doesn't chase trends. He is an era unto himself. In a world where legendary progressive rock musicians like Rick Wright, Chris Squire, and John Wetton have all made their final farewells, Steve Howe is unwavering, quiet, and resilient like a guitar string that has never broken. He is a living example of a philosophy in addition to being the custodian of Yes music. The artist just needs an instrument, not a temple, when art becomes into religion. And his transformation from a self-taught London kid to a worldwide symbol of artistic expression is more than just a musical tale. It is the tale of a guy who made the guitar speak, of devotion, and of a forceful quiet. Childhood. Steve Howe was born on April 8, 1947, in Holloway, a working-class neighborhood in North London where the shroud of industrial smoke and the clatter of trams overshadowed the lack of dreams. His family was not creative. His dad was a construction worker. His mom took care of the house. Their youngest son's love was becoming more intense, but they didn't fully understand it because they had no musical experience. But this was possibly the best present they gave Steve. They did not obstruct him. Steve was unique from the start. He had virtually no close friends, didn't fit in at school, didn't enjoy football, and hardly spoke. Steve spent hours going through dusty vinyl bins at the neighborhood record store while other youngsters wandered the streets or watched TV. Although he never studied formal music theory, he was able to commit full pieces by Django Reinhardt, Cadet Atkins, and Les Paul to memory. He regarded guitar masters as his unseen mentors. Steve's parents gave him his first guitar, a cheap acoustic, when he was 12 years old. He had no mentors, no YouTube, and no teachers. Like he was learning a hidden language that only he could hear, young Howe listened, imitated, made mistakes, fixed them, and played into the night. As a teenager, he worked part-time jobs at an electrical store and a bookshop to save money for a Gibson ES-175, the guitar that would become his right arm on every stage and in every studio. He once remarked, "I didn't learn music like the alphabet. I learned it like speech, by feel." When he was 14 or 15, Steve's only desire was to use the guitar to create his own voice, whereas his friends wanted to become engineers or physicians. His childhood wasn't tragic because of this difference, but it wasn't simple either. Instead of being lighted by spotlights, Steve Howe's formative years were molded by a silent quest to discover his own language in an unlistening world. Later on, that identical quiet would become the subtle, eerie thread of a form of music that spoke to everyone without the need for words. Early professional life. Steve Howe was already well known among London's young musicians by the middle of the 1960s, but not because he was well known. He was unique when it came to guitar playing. Howe was fusing everything, while the dominant tendency was strongly influenced by Merseybeat or blues rock. Traditional English folk music, jazz, classical music, and flamenco. In only a few bars, he could transition from a furious tremolo run to a box-style arpeggio. He would reply that it was just because the sound demanded it, not to brag. He joined the Syndicates, a rhythm and blues group led by the quirky studio was Joe Meek, who produced some of the most bizarre singles of the decade, in 1964 when he was just 17 years old. Although the Syndicates were never successful, it was Steve's first time recording professionally. It was at this point that he understood he didn't belong in mainstream music. He then joined the In Crowd, which subsequently changed its name to Tomorrow, a psychedelic rock group that the British media praised for their potential. Tomorrow shared the stage with The Who and Pink Floyd, with varying degrees of success. But celebrity wasn't the true benefit for Steve. It was the liberty to try new things. He started composing his own songs, fusing slide guitar, fuzz, and phaser in ways that no one else had. He joined Bodast, an ambitious but mostly unnoticed studio project, when the band started to break up. Howe subtly developed his own voice throughout this little-known chapter. Every band turned into a laboratory despite their lack of celebrity, chart success, or international tours. The question, "What else can the guitar say that people haven't heard yet?" was answered on each demo recording until the release of the first version of Yes in 1969. Following a brief performance in which guitarist Peter Banks performed as if the entire theater had disappeared save for him, Chris Squire and John Anderson noticed that Banks had departed the band. Once a single jam session, everything changed once they invited him to try out. Steve Howe became an official member of Yes in April 1970. From an unknown who was sometimes written off as a technical eccentric, Steve Howe entered the progressive rock haven with 6 years of audacious, unheard-of explorations. And he let them to glow beneath the stage lights he never looked for. Prosperous career. Steve Howe wasn't only taking over for a prior guitarist when he joined Yes in 1970. He changed Yes into something very else. The band was still trying to establish its identity in the midst of the burgeoning progressive rock genre prior to his entrance. However, when House took over, he introduced a whole different approach to music in addition to virtuosity and stage presence. Classical in tone but subtly rebellious, bold yet elegant. The Yes album from 1971, which he played on for the first time, was a game-changer. Starship Trooper and Yours Is No Disgrace were no longer only tunes. The guitar no longer merely accompanied them, they evolved into bizarre adventures. It talked, using sound to tell tales. Clap is a live recording of an acoustic solo. Demonstrated more than simply fingerstyle proficiency. It encapsulated his essence, organic, pure, and alive. His single album caused both fans and critics to reconsider the guitar's place in prog rock. Fragile, 1971, and Close to the Edge, 1972, two of the most influential albums in progressive rock during the 1970s, furthered that breakthrough by serving as a major creative force. He created a Baroque-inspired yet contemporary guitar riff and Hammond organ in Roundabout, which made the song one of the few prog songs to reach commercial radio. However, it was near the brink of his creative peak. An 18-minute symphonic epic featured intricate time shifts, smooth flamenco and Baroque blendings, and a great use of silence and space. House touch marks every second. Notably, John Anderson and I wrote a large portion of the work by a Devonshire river. Just spiritual harmony, recollection, and intuition, no studio or tape recorder. Yes, from 1973 until 1977. Went into a bizarre phase where they pushed the limits of instrumentation and song structure. With just 4 tracks, Tales from Topographic Oceans 1973 lasted 80 minutes. Every rule in the text is challenged. Although many saw Steve Howe's time as self-indulgent, it was actually a time of unrestricted creativity. He experimented with everything from arpeggios as delicate as Morning Dew to razor-sharp leads on pedal steel, sitar, and 12-string guitars. Rock was no longer relevant to his music. It combined all of the influences he had ever been exposed to, creating a genre all its own. Although it made him special, Howe's perfectionism also led to internal conflict. His resignation in the early 1980s was caused by disagreements over creative direction and financial pressure from record labels. He did not, however, vanish. Rather, he joined the supergroup Asia, which included Carl Palmer ELP, Jeff Diaz the Bugles, and John Wetton King Crimson. Their 1982 self-titled debut was a huge commercial success, featuring songs like Heat of the Moment. But after just 2 albums, he quit because he felt out of place in such a market-driven setting and longed for something more profound. Together with Steve Hackett of Genesis, another hero from Prague, he founded GTR in 1986. Howe's abstract intricacy and Hackett's melodic sensitivity were 2 different prog ideas that the project intended to combine, but GTR was short-lived as both felt their artistic views were too strong to reconcile. Nevertheless, Howe's legacy was unaffected by these endeavors. There was just one thing they reiterated. He didn't change with the times. He went about in his own orbit. An unnamed reunion began to take shape by the late 1980s. Despite not having the legal right to use the Yes moniker, Anderson Bruford Wakeman-Howe's lineup seemed more like Yes than anything else. This reunion reaffirmed that Steve Howe was more than just the guitarist for Yes. He was a component of its spirit. Howe formally went back to Yes in 1996. However, things had changed. Progressive was no longer a catchphrase, and rock was no longer the focal point of culture. Howe, however, remained true. He continued to play solos he had composed 40 years prior, travel with dozens of guitars, and present 15-minute pieces. Not to win over fans, but to let them know that music is still relevant, as long as it continues to be a source of life. Steve Howe became the final guardian of Yes' heritage following the passing of Chris Squire, the company's co-founder and soulmate for almost 50 years, in 2015. Since then, he has subtly assumed power through action rather than words. He has continued to tour, released new albums, The Quest in 2021 and Mirror to the Sky in 2023, and given his all to the music he has dedicated his life to. Steve Howe's career didn't take off because of media hype or fortuitous hits. It was founded on tenacity, self-control, and an unadulterated passion for music. Steve Howe made the decision to stay the same in a world that is always changing due to time and trends. In the process, he produced vibrations that caused everyone to pause and pay attention. Individual career. Yes, if Steve Howe's works. His solo career was more akin to a meditation room where every note was treasured like a breath, but it was also a battlefield of innovation where his musical vision expanded over the enormous universe of progressive rock. There. Just him, the guitar, and silence, no technical tricks, no pressure from other band members, no need to win over record labels. Even while Steve Howe was at the top of his game with Yes, he started putting out solo albums. He made his first declaration in 1975. There was more to his music than just prog rock. Howe himself played several instruments and orchestrated the record, which combined jazz, acoustic folk, and classical music. Mandolin, piano, bass, and guitar. Beginnings demonstrated something profoundly Howe, sophisticated, intricate, and reflective, despite its lack of financial success. In such spirit, he carried on with his solo career. Nor marketed, nor made to please anyone but himself. It was an introspective trip that used sound to explore the self. Surface Tension and Concerto in D from Steve Howe's 1979 album broadened his repertoire, and Turbulence, 1991, is regarded as one of his most comprehensive creations, fusing contemporary electronic textures with classical emotion. He explored with ambient fusion, minimalism, and world music, yet he never wavered from his distinctive finger approach and precisely sculpted harmonies. The Homebrew series, a compilation of unpolished demos recorded in his bedroom, home studio, and occasionally even on cassette tapes, is one of his most well-known solo endeavors. The 1996 release of Homebrew 1 marked the beginning of a series of albums that took listeners into the backyard of creativity, where famous works like Mood for a Day and Sketches in the Sun first appeared in their raw, personal versions. Because he believed that revealing the process rather than the final product was more honest than anything that had been altered. Steve became more involved in the acoustic scene in the 2000s. He published Natural Timbre in 2001, Spectrum in 2005, Motif in 2008, and Time in 2011, a string quartet CD with a strong classical sensibility. He removed the technological layers with every release, revealing a soul painted with delicate ink brushstrokes. The guitar has evolved into a meditative voice rather than a showpiece. Nexus 2017, a collaboration with his youngest son, Virgil Howe, a talented keyboardist, was one of the most emotionally impactful times in his solo career. Together, the father and son created a contemporary-sounding CD that combined floating guitar tones with electronic rhythms. But a few weeks after the album was finished, tragedy struck. At age 41, Virgil unexpectedly passed away from heart failure. Nexus was more than just a musical endeavor to Steve. It turned into a last audio record of paternal affection. Unfazed, Steve used incomplete recordings left by Virgil to create Lunar Mist, a spiritual successor to Nexus, which was released in 2022. According to critics, the album is a melodic eulogy in which a father plays the guitar as though he is speaking to his deceased kid. There is serenity, peaceful grief, and something that only people who have experienced true grief can convey in that song. Every note carries the enduring presence of the deceased. Private life. Private life has always been a peaceful haven for Steve Howe. Out of the spotlight and unaffected by the media craze. Over the course of his more than 50-year career, he has never been involved in romantic scandals, appeared in tabloids, or used his private life to enhance his public character. This is all he has shared, if there is anything. The only thing that can temporarily stop me from performing music is family. Since the early 1970s, Steve Howe has been married to Janet, his lifelong friend. Steve and Janet stayed discreetly together while their peers and co-workers divorced, remarried, and had public relationships. She was always there when he left, even though they hardly ever appeared together in public. Indeed. Particularly during the most trying times for the family and on excursions with Asia. Georgia, Virgil, and Dylan are the couple's 3 kids. Dylan started playing drums and joined his father in a number of jazz ensembles, such as the Steve Howe Trio. The youngest Howe, Virgil, was the most sensitive musician in the family, while Georgia studied the visual arts. Although Virgil did not pursue his father's progressive rock career as a keyboardist, producer, or DJ, he discovered an odd and lovely harmony with him in the realm of arranging, where melody cut between generations. The press once characterized the father-son link as a continuous stream of sound. Each of them understood the other more via musical phrasing than through words as they composed music together, performed together, laughed together, and sat quietly in the studio. It was a profoundly bright love that was not publicized. Then, a few weeks after he and Steve finished their collaborative album Nexus, Virgil Howe passed away unexpectedly one morning in September 2017 at the age of 41. Natural heart failure without any warning signals was the cause. For the first time in his life, Steve Howe, who had been touring non-stop for more than 40 years, abruptly canceled all of his planned shows, retreated from the media, and left the stage. He was unable to continue, not because of the music. He didn't say anything, post anything on social media, or pay any kind of tribute. As a private, rather than public, farewell, he discreetly published Nexus months later. He was referred to as the father whose strings had snapped by the media at the time. However, Nexus and Lunar Mist, 2022, an album composed from Virgil's incomplete recordings, became emblems of silent perseverance. Steve Howe did not cry in them. He performed. And the shadow of a boy he would never again be able to address by name was present in every note. Steve Howe has been even more withdrawn since that loss. He avoids big events, rarely does interviews, and primarily communicates with fans via his website or little backstage chats. When asked how he feels after everything, he simply replied, "I still play. I still find something in the music. As long as that's there, I can breathe." Steve Howe's life has no loud marriages, no family drama, no poetic declarations. But in that quietness lies something deeper. An artist who chooses to love through action, to father through music, and to survive through silence. Legacy and influence. When people speak of the greatest guitarists of the 20th century, they might name Jimi Hendrix with his fire, Eric Clapton with his blues, or Jimmy Page with his dark mystique. But with Steve Howe, his legacy doesn't lie in a single icon, a hit song, or a style easily mimicked. It lies in thought, in the way he turned the guitar into a tool for musical thinking, not just for performance. For over half a century, Steve Howe has woven a distinct musical language where each note poses a question and every piece is a journey. Unconfined by rock, jazz, classical or flamenco, he transcended genres to construct melodic structures that are unfamiliar, complex, yet never devoid of emotion. That's why he isn't merely a guitarist. He is a sound architect designing worlds that listeners must explore with both their minds and hearts. Recognition came early and deservedly so. From 1977 to 1981, Guitar Player magazine readers voted him Best Overall Guitarist 5 years in a row, making him the first active musician inducted into the Guitar Player Hall of Fame. Among professionals, he became the benchmark for boundless creativity. A man bold enough to make an acoustic solo the centerpiece of a prog album, to play pedal steel and harpsichord in the same song, to reject the easily palatable in pursuit of beauty still undefined. In 2017, he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a member of Yes. On stage at the ceremony, Steve Howe, slender, silver-haired, eyes resolute, didn't give a long speech. He spoke only of gratitude, of patience, and of how he was still learning every day from his own music. Steve Howe's influence reaches far beyond Yes. Guitarists of later generations, Alex Lifeson, Rush, John Petrucci, Dream Theater, Steven Wilson, Porcupine Tree, and Michelle Airfeld, Opeth, have all cited him as a pioneer of nonlinear guitar composition. To them, Howe is more than inspiration. He's a reminder that true longevity comes from loyalty to one's personal voice. To fans, he represents the golden era of prog rock, a time when music was written like novels, albums were heard as journeys, and every detail carried weight. They come to concerts not just to hear Roundabout or Close to the Edge, but to witness Howe himself, the man who still brings nearly 20 guitars on stage for a single performance, who still tunes them by hand, who still plays 15-minute solos like he's breathing for the very first time. Steve Howe's legacy isn't carved into any monument. It lives in every mind awakened by his music. In the thousands of young musicians learning to weave together odd-time signatures because of him. In the elderly couples in the front row holding hands, eyes closed as he strikes the first note of "And You and I." Now in his 70s, he has nothing left to prove. Yet each time he steps on stage, each time he quietly releases a new acoustic album, he reminds us of something nearly forgotten. Music is a living legacy. And if someone tends the flame, it will never die. And Steve Howe, with all his quiet strength and relentless devotion, has kept that flame burning brightly without needing applause, without needing praise. Current life. At 77, Steve Howe still hasn't stopped. While most of his contemporaries have retired or faded into quiet solitude, he continues to create, perform, and record as if time had never passed. To him, music isn't a job. It's the essence of life, a breath, the only way to exist fully in a chaotic world. The year 2024 marked a special milestone in his enduring journey with Yes. Under Howe's leadership, the last surviving member of the classic lineup, Yes launched the classic Tales of Yes tour, traveling through major cities across Europe and Japan. From London's Royal Albert Hall to Tokyo Dome City Hall, Howe took the stage night after night with nearly 20 guitars, tuning each one by hand, playing every note with the precision of a debut performance. Not stopping there. In August-September 2024, Yes continued their trek across the United States with the More Time tour co-headlining with Deep Purple, two of the few remaining titans from the golden age of progressive and hard rock. Amid soaring renditions of Roundabout and South Side of the Sky, Howe remained on stage with his signature calm, no theatrics, no shouting, just letting the music speak for itself. That same year, on September 27, 2024, Howe released a new solo album titled Guitar Cape. A completely independent project written, recorded, and produced by himself. The 14-track instrumental record blends acoustic textures, ambient soundscapes, and gentle electronics in a deeply introspective journey. His son Dylan Howe played drums on select tracks, extending the family's lifeline through sound. Critics praised the album as a meditative space built with guitars, where Howe no longer needed to display technique, only to let emotion lead. Then came 2025, when many thought he might finally slow down. Howe and Yes announced the Fragile Tour, the album series, a U.S. tour scheduled for October to November, featuring a complete live performance of the landmark Fragile 1971 album alongside other hits. More than half a century since Roundabout first echoed through speakers, he still plays every note as if it were brand new. Offstage, he lives quietly with his wife in the peaceful countryside of southern England, where he spends time meditating, gardening, and writing personal blog entries on his website. When not on tour, he plays with his grandchildren records, unreleased compositions, and occasionally sends quiet thanks to the fans who have followed him for over 50 years. No spectacle, no promises, but always present. No one is forcing Steve Howe to continue. He has nothing left to prove. But every time the world gets too loud, he picks up his guitar and plays a melody that makes everything quiet again. In an era where everything is fast, easy, and shallow, his presence is a quietly extraordinary thing. Steve Howe is still here, not to be a legend, but to remind us true music never ages as long as someone still lives for it. Steve Howe never sought the spotlight. He never chased immortality in pop culture, never built a personal brand, never made headlines with provocative statements. And perhaps because of that, he has endured longer than most, like a steady underground heartbeat of a musical era that will never repeat itself. In a world where every artist is pushed through the cycle of young, famous, outdated, forgotten, Howe stands as proof that some don't need to enter that race. He chose the longer path, the quieter one, filled with pauses. And it's precisely that path which led him to a place few artists ever reach. Absolute respect from both audiences and critics alike. Steve Howe's greatest legacy isn't found in award-winning albums, prestigious honors, or standing ovations in concert halls. It lies in the feeling his music leaves behind. Stillness, sincerity, a feeling that's rare in this oversaturated age of noise. That somewhere out there, a man is still quietly playing the guitar. Not for fame, not for money, but because it's what he was born to do.